Today we are going to take a detailed look at conditional formatting, which we briefly looked at yesterday, and then we're going to move on to some functions, some really useful conditional functions, predominantly the if function. And so is everybody happy with everything we did yesterday? Has anyone got any questions about any of that? No? Good, okay. And if at any point you have a question, just shout, or if your microphone's muted and you don't want to unmute it, or you don't know how to, then just wave, or use the chat window, which I've just remembered I've got up there, so I have to keep looking at that. Okay, in that case then I should get started. Conditional formatting, really handy tool for basically making things stand out. So you can make numbers stand out if they go over or under a certain value. Or you can use it to sort of map trends and things and follow the progression of values. So here I've got a really basic spreadsheet with some sales figures, some cost figures. I'm going to put the profit in a minute, and I'm hoping that you could all see that Excel screen. And yeah, all it takes is one person to nod, and I know. Good, right, thanks. And so I'll click in here now and type in this highly complex formula to work out the profit figure, which would be equals the big number minus the slightly smaller number, or at least hopefully. You know, if anyone found that amazing, just let me know. We'll do basic formula afterwards. But I'm going to also fill that across. So I hover on the little blob, drag it across, and so now I've got the difference between the sales and the costs, therefore the profit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to apply some formats to these profit figures. So here's a conditional formatting button, and if I click on that, there's three key sections to this. The top section is sort of basic rules where in the older versions you would just create these rules manually, but now there's a helper and it's so easy you might as well just use the helper. It just saves you having to type it. The middle section is where the fun happens because there's interesting colourful things there. And then the bottom section is the technical bit. Now, if I run through the bottom section first of all, then it'll make perfect sense, hopefully, or it'll be the easiest bit done, or the hardest bit done, or something. I don't know, it's Friday. Anyway, I can click on New Rule, and I can manually create a rule. That isn't that essential. For 90% of the stuff, you can just do it using one of the wizard-style things above it, and that'll create the rule for you. Sometimes if you want to do something a little more complex, where, for example, if I want row 10 to become green, if there's a figure in column A that is greater than 50, that kind of rule, you normally have to do that manually because there isn't a button to just generate that. So you'd go to New Rule and you'd create it from there. The next one, really important, clear rules. When you select a cell or a range of cells, this will clear either all the rules on that cell or all the rules on the whole sheet, depending which one you choose, to just get rid of them, because you can put a lot of rules or a lot of conditions on a cell, and sometimes it might all just go horribly wrong. You might be working on an inherited spreadsheet, or you might not even know where the rules have come from, and you can go there and just clear them off the bleed sheet, and then it's nice and clean and ready to start with. In the earlier versions, and by earlier I mean 2003 and back from there, you could create up to 3 rules per cell, which at the time seemed quite handy. When they introduced the later versions, they upped that to 256 rules per cell, I believe. I think when you start to get into the 200s, normally that's time to find a hobby. Needless to say that you can have enough rules for whatever you want to do. So that's for clearing them. And the last one is for managing them. So if you've got a rule that's highly complex, you spend ages putting it in there, does all sorts of different things, and then makes it go green as a result of it, if suddenly someone says, oh no, we want it to be blue now, then rather than having to just delete the rule and start again, you can go to manage rule and you can just tweak it and change a little bit about it. So like I say, that's a technical bit, the bit down the bottom. The bit at the top is the one we're interested in now. Highlight cells, really easy. I've got a bunch of cells there. I've selected the profit figures, and I've got to say anything that is under 1,000, make it bright red. So I can just go less than. It brings up the less than helper screen thing. It comes up with an average figure of the cells that I've selected, and I'm going to change that to 1,000. And then it comes up with its default set of formats. I could use one of those, or I could just, oh, actually I want red text, so yeah, that'll do. I'm just going to select red text. And if I click on OK, then none of them are affected because none of them are less than 1,000. However, if there was a bad month of sales, 1 month or quarter, if I hit return, I shouldn't have done 9, I should have done 900 prepared for this one. Then you can see it's 500 and it stands out. A hyphen doesn't really stand out when it's red. Having said that, that doesn't stand out massively because it's not a very bright red. This is a good example of going into manage rules. I'm going to make it bold as well. So there's my rule. If I click on that to highlight it, click on edit rule, click on format, I'm going to make it red and bold, and then it will stand out. Then OK, OK, and OK. Right, so however, if they picked up the pace, then it would no longer be red. I'm going to do another one, another simple one like that. If I select all these cells, go to conditional formatting, highlight cells. This time I'm going to say greater than. And here I'm going to say 3,000. And then here I'm going to choose a custom color scheme. So I'm going to go to custom format. And I'm going to make it really stand out. I'm going to go for a background fill of red. No, green to stand out with a border, a bright blue dotted border, and a font that's both bold, italic, and white. Now I'm going to click on OK, and OK again. If they get over 3,000, everyone knows about it. And same thing there. So there you go, that's basic conditional formatting. And of course, a really important thing to be aware of it is that you can get rid of it by going conditional formatting, clear rules from selected cells. That's better. Now what I'm going to do is something a little bit more interesting. I'm going to go to sheet 2 and I'm going to create a page full of numbers, just some 3-digit numbers. Rather than typing up loads of random numbers, I'm going to use a function called rand between. Now, quite often people say to me, why is there a function for generating random numbers? Why is that useful? Well, apart from the fact it's really useful for me with training, there's about 3 different functions in Excel for generating random numbers, and sometimes that's incredibly useful. For example, if you've got a spreadsheet, if you're working in HR, I've got a spreadsheet with staff names on it, and you've got 200 members of staff, and you need to give them a password. That's a faff, 200 names, whereas with a random function, you can random generate passwords or letters and numbers and things. If you're doing an audit and you want to check sort of, I don't know, 30% of the invoices that have gone out, but not all of them, you can use an HLOOKUP or a VLOOKUP even, and a random function to randomly select lines out of the accounts and then select things at random rather than having to work out which ones to check, because it's always difficult to come up with random figures. Anyway, that's my favourite rand function. Well, my second favourite, to be fair. The other one, there's one's much better than that. It's called rand between, and you just put small number and the big number, and it gives you a random number between the two. Best rand function is equals rand. This one is really good because that's all it does. You can only ever say equals rand, open bracket, close bracket. And it gives you a completely random number between 0 and 1. Useful, huh? Anyway, moving on. I wanted some random numbers. So there's a column there. There's some rows there, all the other way around. The thing about rand is that if I do anything, they'll keep changing. So I don't want them to keep changing. I want it to be just a page of numbers. So I'm going to copy those using the usual copy procedure. Copy. And then I'm going to paste them on top of themselves as a value. So if I go down to paste options and choose the second one along, values, what that does is it pastes the values, and in doing so it's changed again, but now they're just values. So if I double click on any of those cells, there's no formula there, there's just a number. So I've got a page of numbers, random 3-digit numbers, and now I can do stuff with it. I can select all those, go to conditional formatting, and I could use the highlight cells, and I could see all the ones that are over 200 or 500 or whatever I wanted. It's a bit dull, but that's the principle of this one. I think we've pretty much covered. Actually, duplicate values is quite a good thing to be aware of. I could just click on that. And, oh no, some duplicate ones. Yeah, 155, 155. Not interested. Anyway, that's the top one. Top bottom rules. This is quite cute. If you want to see the top 3% or the bottom 2 items, you can choose whichever one of these meets the requirement. So, for example, if I want to see the top 5%, I can select top 10%, and then where it says 10, change that to 5, and then here choose the format that I want, like yellow fill with dark yellow text. That sounds horrid. Oh, it is. Yeah. There we go. And if this one was in the top 5%, that would stand out as well. Anyway, let's not use that because that is horrible. Then we get down to data bars. Ooh, data bars are cute. This gives you almost a pie chart in a cell. And it's really good for people that like to look at numbers but don't want to spend a lot of effort reading them. You can have a variety of different colours. You can have a solid fill, or you can have a gradient fill. Gradient's the way to go, and the blue one looks best. If I click on that, you can see this. There's a wealth of usefulness there, as I'm sure you'd agree. No?
Mm-hmm.
You can look at this and think, why on earth would you use it? What on earth is it for? But if you imagine we've got department names across the top and month names down the side, although we don't normally have 15 months, but anyway, don't worry about that. If we look at the last department, straight away, just by looking at it, you can say, what happened in their summer? We don't need to look at any of those figures to know that they had a rough summer, because the figures just really dropped. You know, it started off great, ended okay, but oof, these guys are really consistent. These people, you know, they peaked early, but then kind of leveled out afterwards. And so they do have a purpose, these things. So it doesn't matter whether it's a sales team or spending or anything where you've got just a load of figures and you can get snowblind with it. This kind of thing just gives you a straightforward comparison where you can just watch those trends, and it's a handy little tool. But that is data bars. Yeah, that's done smoothly. Never mind. So on to the next one. And it's available in a variety of colours. If you don't like the colours that are displayed, you can choose your own. Colour scales then. This again is another useful thing. There are some horrible colour choices in there. There's some okay ones, but basically, what it does is it shows you a representation of the figures in a way that is similar to when you're booking a ticket, whether it's for the theatre or on a plane or something, where you can see the expensive ones are red and the cheaper ones are green or blue or something like that. With a colour scale, you can either have 2 colours, one for the highest, one for the lowest, and then it graduates between them, or you can have 3 and it'll graduate between the one in the middle. You can choose your own colour scheme, or you can choose these ones. Like I say, some of them are not pleasant, but others, then they are okay. So here, if we was looking at spending, we could have the highest one in red, or if it was sales figures, we could have the highest one in green or blue. Green would make more sense, but anyway, I'm not going to mess with colours. I'm just going to click on this. So you can see the highest ones are in blue, the lowest ones are in red, and it goes through white, so it becomes pink on its way to being blue. And if that figure there was actually a lot higher, then that too would be in blue. And if it was even higher, you completely screw up the averages, like so. So again, this is a great way of quickly getting an idea for what's going on with a big chunk of numbers. And then we get icon sets. This is where the real fun happens. With an icon set, just like the colour scales, it looks at the whole range of numbers and it applies an icon based on the value of this number in comparison to the other numbers. And so if the highest number was 3 and the lowest number was 1, then you'd have one icon per value. But here, of course, it will vary. And you can see you can have arrows, you can have coloured arrows, you can have traffic lights, mobile phone signal strengths, star ratings, whatever sort of seems to suit the spreadsheet, that sort of thing. I mean, this sort of thing is quite cute. The crosses and ticks, because you can use this on a sheet if you want to tick whether somebody's attended a course or whether they've completed a qualification if you've got an HR sheet. And you think like, well, you could just put a tick in there, but this would be easier if you just have a conditional format for the column or for a whole bunch of columns, and then you either type 1 or 0 there, or 1 or 2, and then you can make the text white with a white background. Then all you'll see is a tick or the cross, and it looks quite pretty, I suppose. Anyway, there's uses for this sort of thing, I'm sure, but you can also combine these. I could have data bars on top of it as well, and I could even have colour scales behind that, and it would look really awful, but you can do that. And if you want to be really dynamic, you can go into Manage Rules, and in here, it helps to select it all first. Right, so you can go into Manage Rules, and in here I can open up that rule with Edit, and this icon set is the one that's been chosen. But I can change it. I can say, well, that cross is a bit aggressive. I'm just going to replace that with a sort of red stop. And you can see how it's configured there. It's done by percentages, so we can change that to values if we prefer. But it's basically sliced up into thirds. And so if I only want them to get a green tick if they're in the top 10%, then I can change that from 67 to 90. So now it has to be a really high figure to get a green tick, otherwise it just gets the exclamation mark. I want to click on OK, and OK, the sheet will change accordingly. You see a lot less ticks. Okay, that is pretty much everything there is to say about conditional formatting. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get rid of those horrendous formats, and I'm going to do that by clearing the entire sheet. But what I'm going to do next is Sparklines. Sparklines was introduced in 2013, I think, or 16, and it's arguably one of the best features that's ever been added to Excel. A lot of people don't realise they have it. I've trained people on courses before, and they've gone back to their desks, found out they don't have it because they've got an earlier version. They've returned to the training room in tears. Because this is such a feature. So brace yourselves for this. It's not a difficult one to use, but the rewards, I would say they're immeasurable. Anyway, I've had far too much coffee. Right, if I click on the Insert tab, one of the options here, sort of near the centre, is Sparklines. It comes in 3 different flavours: win-loss, column, yawn, or line. That's where it's all about. If I click on line, I'm prompted by a dialog box. Not a highly complex dialog box, just a dialog box. It wants a data range and it wants a location range. The location automatically defaults to where I've left the cursor, provided I've left it in a sensible place. All I need to do now is select the data range, in other words, this row of data here. So I want this row of data here to form a sparkline in this cell here. And when I hit OK, ready for this? You remember this moment for years. When I hit OK, this happens. Boom, got a sparkline. Oh yeah. And it comes up with its own design tab, so I can change things. And just you're thinking like, well, that couldn't get any better. Yeah, you can put markers on it. That's better. You can click on the drop down and choose a variety of different color schemes, but this is good. And if I were to change the figures, like that one there, if I change that to 999, watch that sparkline. Boom, it changes. Totally interactive, little chart within a cell. None of this messy charts on top of your figures business. And get this, you can only go and autofill it. Well, I could if I could move the mouse. Oh, amazing, huh? And if that isn't good enough, you can even change your row height, and then it looks like little constellations. Ooh, sky at night. Anyway, moving on. So yeah, that's Sparklines, and you can have seconds of fun with that. for actually not a lot of effort. Let me resize that. Oh, no, that looks awful. Yeah, there's a few different tools on the design tab to make it look different, but I think that's pretty much as close to perfection as you can get. So I'm not gonna spoil it by going into any more depth. In fact, I'm going to remove it now because it's going to be a little bit too much to bear otherwise. When you do get rid of your sparklines, not that anyone would ever want to, but there's two ways of doing it. You can either click on the selected one, it gets rid of the first one, or if you want to get rid of all of them, you just click on the bottom one. They're gone. Okay, so that is conditional.
You're so sarcastic, Lynn.
Pardon?
You're so sarcastic.
I'm not. I love that feature. Anyway, that's conditional formatting done. Does anybody have any questions about it? No? Good. Okay.
See, I have a problem when I mix the conditional formatting together. Well, that's my problem. Can never quite get it quite right.
Right.
Doing one is easy, but doing multiple ones.
Okay. Well, this is the thing. I can answer.
Don't ask me what it was I was trying to do because I can't remember.
So if I had conditions on these three cells, if I go into manage rules, what happens here? It shows the conditions. Now, there's two things you can do with this that will solve all your problems. Basically, what you have to consider is in ye olden times when there was only three rules, it was really easy because you'd just say, right, put the hardest to achieve one first, and then you work down to the easiest to achieve one. And that way then, if the criteria is met, the correct rule runs.
Makes perfect sense now you say it, but previously I couldn't work out why I couldn't get them to work properly. Now it makes sense.
Good. Well, it's even easier than that because what you can do is with this, like I say, you can have hundreds of rules. But now in this version, you can click on a rule and say, well, that's more important. And you can bump it up to the top by using the up arrow, or you can move it down by using the down arrow.
Yeah.
Now, that's one way of sort of doing it, but that doesn't solve the problem if it still then gets the next rule applied. So what you can do is you can use this. This is the second option, stop if true, and then it's done. And so if it's based on values, it's easy because you just say hardest to achieve first, and then you work down the list. But if it's like based on a value and based on another thing, so if it's some other external factor where it says the value of this cell is blah blah blah, do this, or the value of this column is blah blah blah, do this to this cell, then you might say, well, this rule is more important, and I want that to run and to stop afterwards. It'll make perfect sense when you're in that situation.
Well, next time I'll try that.
Good. Thank you, caller. Right. I shall now move on. Everyone happy with conditional formatting? Yeah, good. Right.
It's marvellous.
That's what I like to hear. I'm now going to create one of my special whiteboards here by using merge and center, and then uncentering it, and then making the text really big, but not so big that I can't see it all. Right. Okay. What we're going to do now is the if function. The if function is really good. It's really handy. Actually, there's three things ticked off there. It allows you to basically ask a question about anything that Excel knows about. And so I say anything it knows about. It could be the value of its cell, value of A1. It could be the value of the whole of A1 to F99. It could be today's date or the time or the username or the sheet name or the color of a cell. It can ask a question about anything, and then it can give you a value based on the response. But in English, what that means is you can ask a question about something, or actually it doesn't so much ask a question, it makes a statement. Let's put it that way. So, for example, I can say A1 is greater than 50, and that's either true or false. A1 will either be greater than 50 or it won't be. There's no grey areas with this. It's true or false. If A1 contained 10, then it isn't greater than 50. If A1 contained 51, it's greater than 50. If A1 contains 50, it isn't greater than 50. And so it asks a question in a kind of statement style, and the answer to that question is either true or false. Now, it'd be pretty dull if all it did was come out of the word true or false. And so what we can do is we can put something else in there, and it can come up with a value or a word or a calculation. So you can have if statements that are really simple, or you can have ones that are really complex. Quite often an if statement will go into another function or will have other functions in it. So for example, if you were to have an invoice, not that you'd create an invoice on Excel, but if you were to create an invoice on Excel and you had a cell that said delivery charge, now that would be a great opportunity to put an if statement in there, because if people got free delivery when they spent over £50, but otherwise it was a fiver, then you just put an if statement in there that says total value of goods is greater than £50. And then if that's true, then put 0 here. If it isn't true, put £5 in here. And then that would be an example of a simple if statement. You could have an if statement that looked at a list of exam results, and if the pass mark was 62, then you could have the student's name in one column, the exam result in the middle column, and then in the column next to it, an if statement that says, if it's greater than 62, put the word pass, otherwise put the word fail. And then it would just have a lot of text going down the screen. You can make it look at profit figures and calculate a salesman's commission, because he might get one band if he sells a certain amount, and then if he moves on to the next band, if he moves on to the next amount, then he could be on the next band, so it could come up percentages. You can use an if statement to do things like calculate stamp duty on property purchases. And so you can do all kinds of interesting things. Whenever you get something that you just want to do a straightforward function with, and then you've got hundreds of occurrences where you just want to drag it down the screen, and then you go, that's the same for all of them except for this one, or the ones that have got X at the beginning, or the ones that are trade, or the ones that are in the region X. Whenever you get those situations, that's when you put an if statement in. And then the if statement takes care of all the complexity for you. So it says, oh, this is customer X, they get an extra 10%, or this is product XYZ, and therefore we have to take into account the extra tax on it. I don't know, something like that. So I'm now going to go through how they work. An if statement starts with equals, because it's a calculation, followed immediately by the word if, and then an open bracket. It's then got 3 parts to it, as we can see on the screen there with the little helper. The first thing is the logical test. So I'm just going to put a little test in there. Then we have a comma. Then we have the value of true. Then we have a comma. Then we have the value of false. Then we close the brackets. And then I'm going to put a little inverted comma at the beginning of my formula. Did I press F2? If I didn't, this isn't going to work. I did. Not. Right. I'm going to put that at the beginning so I can hit return and it will stay on the screen rather than coming up with an error message. Right, let's put that in the center. No, not that center, that center. Dummy. Right, okay. So, 3 parts to it. Logical test, value of true, value of false. The logical test is the question. Now, if I click here, I'm going to do a logical test based on that sales figure, that 10,000 there. The question could be really easy. It can be as simple as saying A1 is greater than 10, or A1 is less than Z99. It can be something really complex like this column divided by the value of these cells equals this, or it could be something that, like I said earlier, you can ask about the time, the date, anything you like. But we're just going to go straightforward stuff. So I'm going to type in an example of a logical test. That cell there is called H4. So if I just say H4 greater than 5,000, when I hit return, it's true. H4 is greater than 5,000. So it says true. If I said H4 is greater than 50,000, in return, it's false. It isn't greater than 50,000. However, if I put a load of 9s in there, then it jolly well will be. And so that's an example of a really simple logical test. You just say cell is greater than value, or cell is less than cell, or cell equals whatever. So less than, greater than, equals, all that kind of stuff is pretty straightforward. Now I'm going to put that back to a sensible thing and carry on. Then we have the value of true. That's easy. You don't want to see the word true on the screen, that's boring. And so instead we can put whatever we want. We can put 1%, we can put bonus, we can put 25th of December, we can put 200. None of these things matter, you can put whatever you like. The only rule that you have to remember is that if you're putting text in there, it's got to be in speech marks. That's always the case when you're working with formulas. If you don't put it in speech marks, you'll get confused because you'll think it's either a named range, which is where you take a bunch of cells and give them a name, or it'll think it's some function that you've mistyped. So whenever it's text, like if you put it in there, bonus, or go home early, or whatever you want to put in there, put it in speech marks. If it's a percentage or any other kind of number, that's fine, just put it in as a number. But for text, it needs to go in speech marks. So the value, if true, is what we see rather than the word true. The word true, like I say, it's a bit boring. Then we have a comma, and then we move on to the value of false. Again, if it's text, put it in speech marks. And it can be whatever you like. It can be 0.5%. It can be the 1st of January. It can be you're fired. It can be whatever you want. But if it's text, it's got to go in speech marks. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a really simple if statement that looks at that profit figure and says, if it's greater than 3,000, put the word good on the screen. Otherwise, put the word bad. I normally do this on the whiteboard with a pen. It looks much more impressive. Well, it doesn't really, but anyway. That's all I need, so I don't forget what I've just said. But that's the general gist of it. So that's the if statement. I just want to look at that profit figure, and then I want to put the word good there or the word bad there. Not an obvious use, but we're building up to the obvious uses, obviously useful things. So start with equals because it's a calculation, followed immediately by if and followed by an open bracket. It comes up with a nice little helper thing that tells us we're working on a logical test. Because it's bold, we know that's the bit we're working on. And the logical test is that cell there, F7, I want to know if it's greater than 3,000. Simple as that. Then I put a comma in, and now I moved on to the next bit, which is the value if true. If it's true, if it is greater than 3,000, I want the word good in there, which has to be in speech marks. Then we have a comma, and then failing that, we'll have the false value. And if it's not greater than 3,000, then I want the word bad in there. A capital B. Again, that's in speech marks. And then when I close the brackets, the little helper disappears. So I know that I've completed it in the manner in which it expected. I'll hit return. As if by magic, some text appears. And if I autofill that across, we can see we had a couple of good. No, we didn't. We had one good month, the other two a bit ropey. But suddenly things picked up, and that was actually good, like so. So that's a general gist of a simple if statement, a very simple unnested if statement. Normally, when you work on these things, you'd put an if statement inside an if statement to get multiple levels, so you can ask lots of questions. Like, for example, if you're working out stamp duty, that's great fun. The old system of stamp duty used to be quite jolly, and then the new system, which is a much more sensible system, because the way it works, it's really complicated, and it's brilliant on the advanced course. But if we were just doing something like a salesman's commission, if we, let's call it com rate, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a bunch of cells here and make them into percentages. And this cheeky chappy is going to get, well, basically going to have the same argument, I think. Actually, no, let's make it 2.5 grand. It can have 1% if it's less than 2.5 grand, but 2% if it's over. So basically, it'll be if, open bracket, We're going to look at that cell again, which you can just select with the mouse. And we're going to say if it's greater than 2,500, comma, then if it's greater than that, it's going to have 1.5%. Failing that, you'll get 1% commission. Close the brackets, check that I've made any mistakes, hit return. So this is a 2%er. Hang on a minute, I said 1.5. I better give that some decimal places, otherwise it's going to give false hope. Then if I increase that, yeah, there we go. Right, then if I auto fill that across, you can see the commission rate. Then I could do something like equals that times that, hit return, and then we can see the cheeky chappies whopping great commission. Now, that kind of thing is pretty straightforward, but of course, you wouldn't really do it like that. It'd be much more likely that you'd put it all in one cell. So rather than having commission rate, you just add the if statement there, and then at the end of it, I'll use the keyboard instead, I'd say that's got to display your 1.5% or 1%. And so at the end of it, I'm going to say that thing multiplied by F7. So I'll get 1% of F7 or 1.5% of F7. Then I hit return. Obviously, I don't want that as a percentage because that would just be silly. So let's turn that into accounting with no decimal places, thank you. And now I can drag that across, and then there's his whopping great commission. To my column widths, very untidy. It's better. So there we see an example of a fairly straightforward if statement. But if you do nested if statements, then you can take an if statement and put it inside an if statement. And like I say, you can have lots of fun. But it doesn't just have to be ifs that you nest. You can nest all sorts of formulas, functions, I mean, formulae. Let's look at this sheet. Here's one I created earlier. Before we go on to this, actually, go back to the first one. Is everybody happy with this? Does it all make perfect sense? Yeah?
Yeah.
Good stuff. Okay. If you've got any questions about it, or you want any examples that are relevant to things that you can think of at the moment, then just ask or stick it in the chat window. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this sheet here that I whipped up earlier, back when my coffee was warm. That really is cold. Basically, I've got a product file here, really simple example of some products that have got product codes and an analysis code, just because I thought that would make it look more interesting. And they all have a cost price, a trade price, and a retail price. And what I want to do down here is I want to type in the product code and then get the relevant price. And so if I was doing that, if I just wanted to type a product code and get a retail price on the screen, obviously you wouldn't be doing this on the same screen, but this just makes it easy to see. Then of course we know a wonderful function for this because we did it yesterday. We use VLOOKUP. So I'd say equals VLOOKUP, and I say what am I looking for? I'm looking for that product there, comma. Where am I looking? I'm looking within this chunk of data up here, comma. Which column do I want to report? Well, I want the retail price, so that will be column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and comma, do I want it to go horribly wrong? False. I'm going to close the brackets and hit return. Hey presto, that's AA03, so I've got the retail price of £55. Yay! Now, if I were to change that to 2, for example, I'm going to get 108. Brilliant. However, we've got this type thing going on here. In fact, that's so important, I'm going to center it. Type. This guy is a trade customer. He shouldn't be paying retail prices. These are retail prices and these are trade prices. If only there was some way to differentiate between the two. This VLOOKUP here is perfectly good VLOOKUP, and it's looking up everything in the correct way, but it's only giving me retail. There's loads of ways of doing what I'm about to do, but I'm going to do this in a nice, easy to follow way. I was just thinking we can use the column number to increase that using if, but that will just get very complicated. So what I'm going to do instead, I'm going to put an if statement in. And the if statement is going to ask if he's a trade customer or whether he's retail. And then it's going to give me the correct price. So I'm just going to say equals if, open brackets, and it'll be this cell here, which is I14. So if I14 equals T, it's not case sensitive, but it needs to be in speech marks. Because again, if it wasn't in speech marks, it would get confused and think that I'm talking about a range of cells, a named range, in fact. So if I14 equals T, comma, then the value of true, and I'm just going to cheat here, let's say me typing it in twice. I'm going to use that VLOOKUP, but I'm going to change it from column 5 to column 4. So there's a nested function. So what I'm saying there is if the customer type is T, then look up in this price index the trade price, then comma. If it isn't, I'm not going to ask if it's retail because it can only be trade or retail. There's no other choices. So I just say if it's trade, do this. Failing that, do something else. And so failing that, if it's not trade, then do the VLOOKUP again. I could cut and paste it, but I'm not going to because I'm not that late. Well, I am that lazy, but that's not the point. Do exactly the same VLOOKUP again. H14 in range B4 to F8. But this time, report column 5. And again, select false because I want it to work properly. I'm going to close the brackets on that VLOOKUP and then close the brackets on the if function. What we've got there is a not massively complex function, but it's still doing quite a handy job. So if I hit return, provided that I've done it properly, a trade customer will get this product for £105. Let's make that nice format. Put it in accounting. Okay, 105 of your English pounds. Whereas if they're a retail customer, I can't leave that highlighted while I'm doing this, that won't work. Right, let's do it like that. If they were a retail customer, then they'd be paying £108, like so. And if they weren't even a customer at all, they're still paying the full price. Simple as that. So let's put it back to trade and get rid of that highlight because that's just unnecessary. So again, it could be any of the products. If I put in 4, then trade customer will be 77, retail customer will be 80. So all I've done there again is I've said if this cell equals T, so look to see if they're a trade customer. That's all I've done. It's just like saying if it's greater than 50 or less than 200. So if I14 equals T, comma, and then if it's true, do this. If it's false, do this. And the true value is looking for the trade price. The false value is looking for the retail price. Okay, straightforward, huh? Yeah, good. Okay. The only other thing to do with these, I mean, the only other thing, there's so much more you can do with if statements. You can ask about various other factors. But another consideration is the OR function and the AND function. These are they're really easy to use. Bye, Craig. They're really easy to use. They just don't work the same way as they do in the English language, which confuses the issue. So I'm going to explain this now. If it doesn't make any sense, just ask me to explain it again, or if it doesn't make sense and this is the first time you've seen an if function, you don't need it, then feel free to switch off for a while. But like I say, feel free to ask any questions. The way the AND function works is, let's use it over here. Let's use my whiteboard to explain it. You have the word and that is, open bracket, and then arguments. So your first one, comma, next one, comma, next one. I don't know how many you can have. It's probably 255, normally is, or something similar to that. Then close the bracket and hit return. Now what that will do is, I suppose you put equals at the front of it. You wouldn't normally use this on its own, but this will return either a true or a false. And in here, these X's will all be arguments, well, logical tests. So they can say A1 greater than 50, B2 less than 200, C4 equals hello. And they can all be completely different, or they can be on a similar strength or a similar line. But it'll ask loads of different logical tests. And if every single one of those logical tests is true, then AND will give you the result of true. Okay? If one single one of them isn't true, then it'll come up with false. So it's like saying the sales are good and the costs are low and the cars are clean and the tanks are charged up and the haircuts have been done. All of these things are ready to go, and then it's true. But if, for example, the sales are great but the costs are massive, then it'll be false. So that's how an AND function works. An OR function works in a very similar way, but different. Equals or open brackets, argument, 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 argument. Well, logical test, logical test, logical test. With an OR function, every one of these logical tests can be asked, and you can ask lots of them. All it takes is one of them to be true, and then the result is true. So it's like, are the sales good, or are the costs low, or are the profits high, or are the cars clean, or are the staff wearing suits, or are breakfasts made, or any of these things. So the way that you'd use these is directly in conjunction with an if function, normally, because on their own they're just look a bit daft. So you say if and bang, 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 do this, or this. And so it's a lot to take in one go. Normally when I do and or I do or, I'll do this on the back of somebody having previously been using if for a long time. But I'm going for it now just in case you tinker with something and then you think to yourself, actually, I could do with learning that again and know how it works properly. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say this guy, he gets things at trade prices or this particular sales thing. But only if he's within his client terms or credit terms. I think that's what I thought when I typed that in earlier. So if they're not within credit, not within their credit limit, if they've got outstanding bills, or if they regularly exceed their credit limit, or if they're just generally a little bit cheeky, they're not having stuff at trade, they're going to pay retail. So if he's within those limits as well, then he will get trade prices. So that's where I'd use an AND function. So if I use it on its own, like I say, equals AND, open bracket, the first logical test is that cell there has got to equal T in speech marks because it's text, comma. The next logical test is saying, well, that has got to equal Y. And that's the only two conditions that I've got. So it's saying and this and that. When I hit return, it'll be true. But even if he's a trade customer, but he's not paid up on his account, then it's false. And so the way that you'd use the AND function in this exact scenario is rather than saying I14 equals T, we say exactly that AND function that I just typed in. So it'd be if open bracket and open bracket. It's starting to get complicated now, isn't it? I'm looking at I14, so I say I14 equals speech marks T speech marks, comma, J14 equals speech marks yes speech marks, close brackets. That's the AND function, which is the logical test, which will either display true or false. And then if it's true, do one VLOOKUP. If it's false, do the other VLOOKUP. And when I hit return, he's paying retail because he's not got his credit updated. Just pay within your credit terms, and you can have the trade price. So if I change that to yes, yeah, it gets it a trade. Easy, huh? You're thinking, when the heck am I going to use that? That doesn't matter. The important thing is that if you ever need it, you know there's something there. And if you think, oh yeah, the or function or the and function, they sound like the right thing to do, and then you try using it in the way that you'd expect to use it, it won't work. The way you expect to use it is like this. And so this should make, hopefully make a bit more sense if you come across it. Anyway, the or function works in the same way. I'm not going to show you that as well because that would just be probably a dead horse. Just unnecessarily complicating the issue. But there you go. That's the joy of the if function and its associated functions.